Hi, folks. Chris Voss here from the ChrisVossShow.com, the ChrisVossShow.com. Hey, we're coming here with another podcast. We certainly appreciate you joining us as an audience. You guys are rock stars. We love you guys and appreciate you tuning in and downloading the show. Be sure to give us a listen because the podcasts always seem to get better, closer to the hour mark. Go to youtube.com/Chris Voss and subscribe to the channel there. Also, press the bell notification for notifications for your mobile device. Also, go to iTunes, Google Play, so that you can take and subscribe to the show. Be sure to refer it to your friends, neighbors, relatives, family, dogs, cats, pool boys, mistresses. Get everybody in on the action of the Chris Voss Show. Get them to listen to one of the funniest shows on the internet, or not. We have all the best shows. Sorry, I'm cracking myself up here. And yeah, whatever. Just go to patreon.com/Chris Voss and support the show. So we have a wonderful gentleman. I believe I've known him for several years on the Facebook channels, the interwebs of the Facebook world. Mark John Clifford. And Mark has been an investment banker for 20 years in his life. He's opened his own investment firm. He's had his ups and downs, of course, and we're going to learn some important lessons on his recovery. He spent about 10 years in federal prison for a white-collar crime, so this should be an interesting story. And let's see, he moved to California, opened a nonprofit for saving animals, which is always good. And he's worked with Fresno State and their entrepreneurship program by hiring students to work for nonprofit. He's had 2 heart attacks. We might hear some stories about that. And he turned the nonprofit to the school. Okay. And in 2008, he was diagnosed with diabetes, started 3 websites to fight depression. I'm not sure if that's like a good thing. Usually me starting websites causes depression. And he brought over 2 million followers and members to those websites. He runs a site for kids, which is a nonprofit that him and his wife fund. And he raises awareness for kids with diabetes and successful awareness 4 years in a row. I guess you've been doing this. He live streamed TV, donated 10 high definition channels to broadcast, and does really well with that. And they have a new health awareness site called Healthy Broccoli. Wow, I like broccoli. And he hosts a podcast called All Mishegoss. Am I pronouncing that right, Mark?
It's all Mishegoss.
Mishegoss. I was going to say Meshuggah from the Jewish.
Well, almost.
And Mark, welcome to the show, buddy.
Thanks, Chris. Thanks. I enjoyed being here.
What does Mishegoss mean?
Okay, Mishegoss is Yiddish for insane, crazy, mad. And the way the name came up is when I had my investment firm, I had a mentor who used to come in my office every day, drive me insane. And he would look at all the madness going on with brokers and secretaries, and he'd say, "This place is Mishegoss. It's all Mishegoss." And I finally found out what it meant. Well, about 4 years ago, he died. He was in his 90s. He passed away. And, of course, I was out here, so I didn't get to see him. And I wanted to do something in his honor. So I started a website called itsallmishegoss.com. Then that morphed into a newsletter and a podcast. And that's what I mainly do, is a podcast called It's All Mishegoss. And that's on Anchor Radio, anchor.fm. And
so now I know what that name is that my Jewish friends are always calling me.
That's it. That's
it's close to Meshuggah.
Yeah, it's, that was almost the name, but Mishegoss.
Yeah.
So
Jewish people are my favorite sort of religious people, even though I guess it's kind of a race, because they never knock on your door on Saturday morning and try and convert you. They don't ever really try to convert you to Judaism. They're like, we don't give a shit if you join or not. We don't care. We're doing our thing.
Yeah, usually they don't want you either.
Yeah, exactly. This is an elite club.
Right.
Accounting and banking here, and you can't join. But no, my Jewish friends are my favorite religious folks because they don't get in your face about joining their cause and stuff like Scientology or the Mormons or Seventh-day Adventists.
Jehovah's Witnesses.
If Jews ever start showing up at my door on Saturday morning going, "Hey, have you heard about the Quran?"
Yeah.
Yeah, the Quran. then I probably will have left Jewish friends after that. But until then, you guys are good with me.
Okay.
So you've got an interesting bio. You're the first person that I've had on the show who admits to having a 10-year prison term. We'll want to probably hear that story and other ones of your life. So I'm going to let you have the floor and give us a life story and how you've rebounded from some of these challenges.
Okay. Well, starting with, I was born in Palermo, Sicily, as I was telling you before the show. I was born at the airport, and I was actually born in the back room, which had a slop sink. And the gentleman that basically saved my life, because I was born 2 months early, so I was a preemie and I was having issues. It was the janitor, who was also the first aid man and the security guard. And this was back in 1954, so they weren't too advanced back then, you know. And they
probably didn't have hospitals back then yet. That was probably, dinosaurs were just barely going extinct, I think, right?
Yeah, it was still like carts and horses or whatever to get you to the hospital. That was the rescue squad. And some guy was on top going, woo! You know, he was the siren, and they had a flashlight for the light.
Did they have to walk through the snow uphill both ways?
Yeah, of course. But my mother always said that's why I was in a hurry all the time, because I was born 2 months early, and I was in. So I don't know.
Come here to this room. I got places to go. Damn it.
Yeah. I got things to do, like go to jail. You know,
stuck in here. It's dark.
You're holding me up. But my life was kind of a strange life, because my dad worked for the government, for a really secretive agency called the CIA. And we traveled around Europe when I was a young kid. And my mom, of course, was Sicilian. She was born in Sicily, came over, and all her family was the opposite of the government. In other words, they were in the mob. so I had this family life of my dad's stepbrother, was a gentleman named Clark Clifford, who was Secretary of Defense for Lyndon Johnson. He was an attorney, high-profile attorney in Washington. He was the anti-mob guy. You know, he was the one that was perfect and, you know, legal. He was counsel to Harry Truman, Secretary of Defense for Johnson, counsel to Kennedy, all the Democrats, all the good guys. But he did counsel Richard Nixon too, he said, and, you know, he had other people. But he did.
I like how you quantified that. He counseled all the good guys, but then he did also counsel Nixon.
Right, and he forgave Nixon. You know, he said Nixon did a lot of good. He opened up China, and it's, you know, and that, you know, other than that, he didn't do much, but he did that. And he was fun to look at, as my uncle would say. You got to laugh at him. He'd say, "Look at this guy. He's our president. Look at him." Now we have something totally different, which is pretty similar to Nixon.
Now Nixon's looking really good right now.
You know, so but I grew up in this lifestyle of two different worlds. One mob, one.
So did your mom have mob relatives and stuff?
Yeah, my uncle was one of the underbosses in Rhode Island, which was the smallest state but had the most mob connections. And I grew up knowing both worlds. I mean, I knew that there was one side which was legal and the other side was running numbers for my uncle, or, you know, whatever, as a kid, because the police didn't bother the kids. You know?
Trucks.
Yeah, you know, and so needless to say, what happened was, when I was born, I had polio when I was a kid.
Oh, wow.
At 50. And it took a toll on me as a kid. Had a bunch of surgeries. But the one thing I always loved as a kid was playing hockey. So my dad and my mom never held me back. They had me playing hockey. And the other thing was, at the age of 7, which back then, this wasn't the name of it, they diagnosed me with ADHD and ADD. Back then, it was called hyperkinetic disorder activity. In other words, I was
2 months premature, so clearly you had an ADD problem.
Yeah, right back then. So
get me out of here. I got things to do and see.
Yeah, you know, and so they put me on meds for 1 year, and my father got fed up with me and he wanted to kill me. So they said, take him off the meds. And then what they did is they put me through this program funded by the government or through the government, however you want to look at it, to teach me visualization techniques with your eyes open. And that's how I've survived since 7 to now, is using these techniques to keep my mind, because when you have ADHD, you're doing 20 things at once and you don't finish any of them. So the idea is, okay, how do you finish something, and complete something? So this,
you just describe my daily activities.
Yeah, so this shrink taught me this technique of visualization with my eyes open, so that I could actually sit and do a conversation with somebody, do a website, and still get everything completed by the end of the day, because I'd be focused on something that had nothing to do with either one. You focus on, maybe it was a bunch of numbers or something that would make you feel at home or whatever. And as a kid, it was always about cartoon characters. And as I got older, I had to switch that, because now I was older and I would laugh in people's faces because I'd be thinking of Porky Pig. So I had to switch to something that was a little more grown up. And that's when I started doing numbers in my head and all that. I went to Brown University on a hockey scholarship. Signed a contract to play pro hockey in my junior year, and then shattered my leg. That was the polio leg. And I lost my contract and everything else. So that's what brought me to the investment world, because when you can't do anything else, you go become an investment banker. Back then, a stockbroker, whatever, which turned into an investment banker. I started working for a firm called Drexel Burnham, which is pretty famous because of a guy named Mike Milken. I don't know if you remember that name, but he was the junk bond king of the world.
What happened to Mike? He disappeared after the 80s.
Yeah, he's in California in I can't remember the city he lives in. He started a nonprofit. He is involved with Leapfrog. He's one of the founders of Leapfrog. He's got a nonprofit that works with kids with disadvantages and all that. And he funded it with probably all the money that they never recovered or whatever. I can't be sure of that. But Mike was a great guy to work for. He was intense. He was a typical ADHD person. He had, pretty much the same kind of thing I had. He worked on the West Coast in Beverly Hills. We worked in New York. And we kind of handled all the paperwork, all the dirty stuff that he was doing as we were doing investments. And, insider trading, helping Donald Trump open up casinos with junk bond money that he didn't deserve. Right. That's my work with Trump, was I did junk bonds back in New York. So it was pretty interesting.
Michael Milken, if I recall with Michael Milken, he became kind of the poster boy for either insider trading and or junk bonds.
Right. And he learned it from a professor at Wharton University who had the idea for junk bonds. And Mike brought it.
I mean, that was back in the days of Ivan Biosky and 1980s with and then Trump put out his book back then. God, that should have been old. I remember there was a lot of people who were doing, I think, what Michael Milken was doing. It's just he kind of became the poster whipping boy. If I recall rightly, you correct me if I'm wrong.
Oh, yeah. No, he was. And he became what happened was at the time, he got 10 years of prison time also. Yeah. But a lot of people turned on him. They all gave him up, as usual. As always, so your best friends give you up, And he went to prison, but once he got in, he made a deal. He gave up some people. He got out early.
I remember that.
And there was a big scuttle about that because they never knew really who he gave up. And really what he did was he didn't give up any one person. He gave up more entities like banks, other financial institutions that were involved in the inside trading. So I never really got mad at him for that because the people he did talk about were the people that screwed him over anyways. Excuse my language. So he kind of said, well, you guys deserve a little, time in prison too, because it's really nice. Mike was at a camp. He had it made, it was kind of different. He was in California, sunshine. I was in Lewisburg Penitentiary where it snowed every day, even in August. And I was in Pennsylvania.
Did you get pulled into the Milken thing, or what happened to you?
Well, okay. So working at Drexel, I ended up going and opening my own firm after a few years. And what it was we took on the name of the firm was International Investment Group, and we took on the stuff that Drexel didn't want, usually like low-end financing or investment. Back then, investment bankers were the venture capitalists that are today, because you never heard of venture capital back then. It was, we're going to make an investment. Go see the investment banker. You know, there were none of these. There were none of the Shylock venture capitalists that are out there that clipped you for everything. And you know, and it's just on the side note. It's really funny with Fresno State. My wife Patty and I are mentors right now for the entrepreneurship program. And we were at one of the meetings, and they were asking me my background, and I said I was an investment banker. And the student looked at me. She was probably 19, 20 years, sophomore. She said, "What's an investment banker?" So I like put my tail between my legs and realized, damn, I'm old. They don't know what an investment banker is. They only know a venture capitalist. So that taught me right there to be real careful about what you say. So what happened was, when I was running my firm, I was involved in, we had gotten insider trading by then, was kind of quieting down and a little bit. And what I was doing was my mom's brother, who was in the mob, was coming to me for financial advice and started bringing me all these nice clients. And they were all wealthy, and they all had vowels at the end of their name. Well, you know, I wasn't one to say no, because I was trying to build a business.
Yeah.
And I started, you know, I already had learned how to launder money. But this was helping me because I had more to launder. You know, I had like people with lots of money, and instead of just a small client.
Were you getting bags of money in paper bags?
Well, kind of, yeah. You know, sometimes it was duffel. For so long. Yeah, sometimes duffel bags, sometimes paper bags. It just depended. And I learned about the Cayman Islands at this time. And you know, the Cayman Islands were a wonderful spot. They made the Bahamas look like a joke. So I learned about the Cayman Islands, Liechtenstein, Switzerland, and all these countries that just are wonderful about accepting money that comes from America that needs to be hidden, you know?
That was all the time. That was the time Mark Rich was doing, I think, some of that or a lot of that, wasn't he? Was it Mark Rich?
Yeah, Mark Rich, yeah. And so we were involved in that somewhat, or I was involved, not the firm, but I was. And but also I was doing investments, and I had the investment firm running, and I had this side running. And then during all this time, my dad's stepbrother, who was an attorney, was working on opening a bank in Washington, D.C. And they started dealing with a bank called the Bank of Credit and Commerce International, which was a major Saudi Arabian bank. It was funded by the Bedouins, the CIA, numerous drug cartels, and normal people that worked on the street that lived in London and all over the world.
CIA was moving their Contra money or Contra money?
Well, the Contra, Air America, all those great things, you know. And back then it was, you know, pretty open. Everything was open back then. Back in the 80s, you could get away with anything, you know, if you just knew certain things, you know, like laundered. We had the old IBM computers. You didn't use that to launder money. You laundered money by making connections. Yeah. And you know, like, I try to tell some of these kids today that are like, you know, looking for venture capital or on social media. I tell them, do you know what a handshake is? Do you know what a deal is? You know, you're on social media, you're on Twitter, you're doing this, you're doing that. But do you really know how to work a deal? Walk into a bank and negotiate like percentage rates of what you're going to transfer and how much you're going to make on your money, and you're going to launder this, but it's all on a handshake or a phone call, or, you know, and they don't understand that. And that's part of what I do with the podcast is I try to bring back the days of insanity, Mishegoss, and say, you know, like sometimes some of the posts or the podcast are about what we used to do, how we did things, and listening to people, and you know, trying to get people to listen. And so what we did is everything was by, you know, you'd fly to the Caymans, you'd fly to Switzerland, you fly here, you fly there, and you did a lot of traveling. You never did anything on a computer. You never sent an email. God forbid you write a real letter.
Yeah, anything that's traceable.
Yeah, anything, you know, even the stuff you shred, the FBI will put together. So you didn't do anything that could lead to anything. So it was all personal, you know. And it was fun, you know. I mean, I can't say I didn't enjoy it. Of course, you know, you have all this power at the age of, I was under 30. And I had this power to make a banker do what I wanted. Okay, so think about that. You know, you're going in to see a guy that's probably in his 50s that runs the bank, and you're telling him, this is what you're going to do. And you walk out at 28, you got an ego the size of Manhattan, okay, if not bigger, okay? Because you just scored a deal, and you're thinking, I'm 28 years old or 29, and I made this guy do what I want. And I learned my technique, whatever you want to call it, I learned from Jim Rohn. Jim Rohn was one of my mentors. And you must know him, right? You know who Jim Rohn is, right? Sounds
familiar, the name, but I can't.
He's a big, okay, he's like Zig Ziglar. He was one of the big motivational speakers way back.
Yeah, I think I've seen him.
Okay, well, Tony Robbins was one of his, Tony Robbins brags that Jim Rohn was his mentor.
Jim Rohn. Yeah, okay, yeah.
Okay, that's my accent. All right. Okay. Yeah, and Jim, I got to meet Jim personally. I got to hang with him. I actually learned a lot about his technique of selling people and what's behind the motivational speaker deal. You know, he used to say these people come and feed off of me, and what they don't realize is they all have it within themselves. They just need to find it. He goes, and I'm up
in 2011, 2012.
Yeah, around there.
Yeah,
and I think his daughter, I'm not positive. It's either his daughter or his son that kind of kept everything rolling with the tapes and the CDs or whatever they use now, you know. But Tony Robbins always refers to Jim Rohn. And of course, I have my thing. I like Tony. I know Tony. Tony was a great guy before he lost all his weight and became a motivational speaker. He's got his, you know, qualms, whatever. And I've had people, I used to send my brokers to go see Tony Robbins, which was funny. And they'd come back all pumped up, ready to sell all this stock. And 6 weeks later, they'd be depressed. And I said, what's wrong? I just blew $5,000 on you to go to see Tony Robbins, the greatest speaker in the world, right? You're supposed to be motivated. And they said, well, nothing he said works. Well, I said, okay. So what happened was that led me to writing a book at the time called Dynamic Life Management. And what it was a workbook that I used to use with brokers at my firm, at Drexel, at some of the other firms. And what it was I would take what they learned at a Tony Robbins seminar or a Zig Ziglar or even a Jim Rohn, and I'd make them understand that that's Jim Rohn. That's his DNA. That's not going to work for you. You need to convert it to your DNA. And what I do is through sessions and, you know, discussions and talks, we'd end up making a book that was basically like a business plan for life and how they would take everything they learned from Jim Rohn or whoever, Tony Robbins, and switch it to their own workability and then become successful. So that was kind of what I started doing for a while in between all the other great stuff I did. And of course, having ADHD, I got bored with that. So I turned that over to someone else and kept going back to the money thing because that was more profitable. The other stuff I was doing for free. So I started going back to that. And then what happened was, as I was saying, my uncle decides to open a bank in Washington. They're working with the BCCI. I became the financial consultant and middleman of the whole thing. And what happened was, of course, it all fell apart. And the Congress got involved because of the CIA and my uncle being a lawyer and politician somewhat. So a couple of senators decide that there's something wrong with this picture and it looks like fraud. So they start an investigation and all of a sudden indictments come down and my uncle, his law partner, a banker in London, and a sheik over in Bedouin City, where you're never going to find him, get indicted. And in the end, the banker got 5 years. My uncle's law partner got acquitted. They wanted to get my uncle. Someone had to go to jail. So it was like my uncle's 80. They're going to pick him, and they said, we'll give you 5 years. Now, you have to understand, this banking scandal was to the tune of $13 billion.
Holy shit.
This was a lot of money back then.
It's a lot of money back then. Now it's nothing.
Yeah, now it's like an average payday for a VC, you know. So they, in the end, what happened was they offered my uncle a deal, and my name had been thrown around, but I was an unindicted co-conspirator. They knew I was involved. They couldn't figure out why. So I ended up going to the bat for my uncle. I said, you can't put this guy away. He's 80 something, and a year will kill him. So I went in and we made an agreement, and the thing was, you're going to get 5 years, blah, 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 blah. I said, that's not bad. Well, I ended up getting 10 years. The judge found it in her, heart to give me more time because I deserved it. And that's, okay, 10 years. Well, then they decided that you should go to a penitentiary because we want to know where the money is. Well, I didn't know where the money was. It's probably back in the desert for all I know, buried in the sand. So they put me in a pen, and I guess they thought it would scare me. Well, of course, my mom's relatives, like a few of them, were there in the pen doing life sentences. One was doing a life sentence for a 3-time offender in the feds, and another was in there for murder. Couple of mob bosses. So everything was relayed that I was coming to prison. So the day I walk in, I had bags on my bed all filled with commissary items and clothes, and I'm like, hey, this is pretty nice, That
was back in the day when the mob used to run the prisons.
Yes. And I went in the fall. Well, that Christmas, my first Christmas in, I was, Christmas Eve, I was depressed. All of a sudden at midnight, the guard comes to the gate, racks open my grill gate because it was bars. And he says, you want it down in the kitchen. And I'm thinking, what am I going to the kitchen for? Like, I'm going to get a beating or something. There's something up. And I said, I don't work in the kitchen. He goes, no, they want you down there. So I went down to the kitchen. This is about 12:30. So it's Christmas morning. And I walk in, and there's a table about, 12 feet long, and about 20 guys there. And they're all mob guys. And on the table is seafood. Everything you can think of, from lobster to shrimp to clams to oysters, squid, everything. And they're having the Feast of the Seven Fishes, which is what the Italians do on Christmas Eve. Well, these guys brought all this seafood in, and they got wine, they got bread. And I'm like, this is prison? I could stay here for 10 years, But anyways, over the 10-year, without getting it, over the 10 years, they shipped me around all over the country because they were trying to find this money that I never knew what happened to it. And they would interrupt my program. But all during this time, I had to live with, in a 8x10 room with ADHD, which doesn't pan out well for ADHD. And you're living under their rules. You get up at this time, you have to do this. You go to dinner at this time. Everything is on their time frame. So in one way, it helps you with ADHD. In another way, it's a real, pain in the neck because you're changing your whole lifestyle. And visualization techniques weren't working because my visualization was, what's the next day in prison going to look like? And that makes you more depressed because it's like, oh no, I got to go through this again. There's going to be another riot or there's going to be a fight. But you learn to survive, and you don't give up. My whole thing during that prison time is, prior to going in 95, I had started a nonprofit for animals on the East Coast, and it's called Animal University Foundation. And the whole idea was to teach people how to save animals, because everyone's out there wanting to save animals, and they do, but they don't understand how to save them and how to give them a good home and what to do. They build a kennel in their backyard. They bring in 30 dogs or cats, and the next thing you know, the city's closing them down because they're not licensed or their facilities are dirty. So what we were doing just before I went in is I had raised a bunch of money from some Jewish investors. I'll use them because they're the ones that came forward with my buddy. The guy that was my mentor all during this time was a gentleman named Jack Weitz. That's the guy that would talk around yelling Mishegoss and all that. And Jack became very close. He was like my second dad. And he helped me raise $15 million for animals. And what we did was we went around on the East Coast, and we would go to these mom and pop shelters that were open in the backyards. And we'd try to help them get licensed. We'd get them fixed up. We'd put in like new flooring, give them cement floors, give them drains, fencing, so that the city wouldn't shut them down, because they were all non-kill shelters. They were just trying to preserve the animals' lives. So for me, that was really huge, and I wanted to help, and I worked with as many as I could on the East Coast. Then I went away, so I couldn't do anything. Well, when I got out in 2005, my mom had died while I was in prison. And that's another, I'll have to tell you that story, because I was out for a little while she passed away. But I'll go back to that in a minute. But anyways, I got out in 2005. I moved out to California because of 9/11 and everything else that was going on. Figured I better go to California because all they have is earthquakes and no one's bombing any buildings at the moment. So I came out here, and I was down in Southern California. I was in what they call North Shore, which is just outside of Indio on the Salton Sea. And a friend of my mom's had an animal sanctuary, and she took in all types of animals, farm animals, everything. And it was on 5 acres of land. So I went there to help her reestablish her shelter, put some money into it, and get her all licensed and everything else. She was a nonprofit already. We hooked her up with Walmart, who donated all the food to her. And they would donate sometimes 50 bags of dog food a week that got ripped open. So what they do is they can't sell it, so they tape it up. They get credit for it, but then they donate it. So they donate cans of dog food, bird seed, anything you can think of. And we set this all up for her. And she had at the time about 50 animals on her 5 acres of all horse, llamas, donkeys. We had pigs, potbelly pigs, ducks, roosters, you name it. All types of dogs, cats. And they all ran, well, the dogs and cats ran free, but the other animals were pretty much in their pens and all that. Had iguanas that had been rescued from people. So she covered the gamut of animal rescue. And I spent 6 months down there getting her established and all that. And what happened was, when I got out of prison, I was on the East Coast, and I flew out to California. And I flew into Palm Desert. And the day I landed was August, and it was 115 degrees. And I walked off the plane and I almost died. I'm an East Coast boy. You know, I'm used to like moisture and humidity. This was dry heat. It just about sucked the air out of my lungs. And they're all laughing at me, and they're saying, don't worry, this is dry heat. You'll get used to it. 3 weeks into the dry heat thing, I was swearing. I was saying, you can take your dry heat and shove it. And I couldn't believe I could fry an egg on dirt. I mean, cement's one thing in New York City, but on dirt, it was so hot. I couldn't believe it. Well,
how hot was it?
What? How hot was it?
Sorry,
It was hot.
how hot was it? Setup joke.
So when fall came, I didn't know how I never lived in the desert. Well, now all of a sudden the weather starts changing to weather I liked. It was like down to 40 and 50. I'm wearing shorts and a t-shirt. And the woman and her sons are all dressed up in sweatshirts, sweatpants. They're going out and saying, what's the matter with you people? It's beautiful out. And at night, they want to light a fire in the fireplace. I'm saying, you're out of your mind. You know, it's 40 to 50 degrees. It's beautiful. It's spring. You know? So what happened was I met a woman, and
that's how it always starts.
Yeah, she lived in Clovis, California, which is near Fresno and right next door in middle of the state. So I went up to Clovis. This was December, and I saw snow in the mountains. Well, I'm a sucker for snow, and I started thinking, wow, this is really nice up here. Maybe I should move to Clovis. You know, plus I'd be closer and be with this woman, and I could move the foundation up here, and everything will be fine. And the weather's beautiful. So I did. I moved to Clovis. That summer, they had their hottest summer for 2 weeks. It was like 113 degrees for 2 weeks. It was the hottest one they had in 40 years. And I said, the damn heat's following me from down south. I can't get away from this stuff. So I opened up the nonprofit up here, got tied in with Fresno State, and started using some of their students to help me with it. And then through the nonprofit, I met my wife right now, Patty, who owned a cleaning company and also a animal grooming salon, which is how I ended up meeting her. And so she helped me with the nonprofit for the last year before I had the second heart attack. When I had the second heart attack, I just had to give it up. And so I let the Fresno State students take it over, and they brought it back to Fresno State, and they ran it for 2 more years while I was recuperating with everything. And I kind of was their advisor and all that. And then we folded Animal University because we had done whatever we could, and Fresno State couldn't handle it anymore. And I kind of had lost, I don't want to say interest, but I wasn't doing as much because I still wasn't feeling that good. That was around the time I got diagnosed with diabetes, and I started on my quest for, I started on a research track. I'd never been a researcher until I got diabetes, and that's when I really started researching what it does and how it affects you and everything else. So that's where that went. Okay, where do we go now?
So you gotta get into the. You've been doing some good work for the people and humanity and pets and animals. And what was the most wildest thing you saw in prison? I'm just curious because back in those days, the mob ran the prisons.
I think.
What was the wildest thing that you ever saw?
Okay, well, other than the food and the stuff that went on, I think the craziest thing was the one day I walked into the shower. Now, you got to understand the shower in prison is pretty much open, but they do have shower curtains, but they're individual, whatever you want, stalls. So I walked in and I saw 6 pair of feet in one stall, or 3 pair of feet in one stall. And I'm like, oh, shoot, it must be a community shower or something. There's 3 people in there. And I just wasn't ready for that. Okay. I heard about it. I knew it happened, but I hadn't seen it with my own eyes. And then I saw it and I was like, so it looks like they're having fun. So I think I'll leave because I thought I was interfering with everything. And so that was probably the wildest thing. The next under that was one day they have a day room where you can go to watch movies. So it was a Saturday night and I'm watching the movie with all these mob guys and I see these Mexicans and they're all getting up with a can of mackerel. Now mackerel is a nasty ass fish, excuse my language, and it's in a can. And they sell it for $1. And I'm watching these people leave the room one at a time and they're going with mackerel cans. And I'm asking the wise guy, what are they doing? He says, they're going to the bathroom stall because there's a kid there that takes care of them and he collects mackerel. So that's what they're doing. They're paying this kid $1 for, whatever. And I'm thinking, they got a commodity going on. Well, then what happens is this kid who was doing the favors would go and sell the mackerel to people like wise guys or whoever, because you use mackerel for trading or cigarettes. You use
like cigarettes.
So this guy would make like sometimes $25, $30 on a Saturday night in mackerel. He would go and sell it to somebody because what he did is he sent the money home to his family back in Mexico.
Wow.
So
that's how do you committed family member right there?
Yeah. You can't say no to a guy like that. He's doing a good deed. So go ahead, bring. I
really didn't want him to give me a blowjob, but it did help his family. So
right, yeah, I'm contributing.
I'm not gay. I'm just gay for this thing.
Right. So those are some of the things that were wild to me. Like coming from I don't want to say a spot where I didn't know things, but that was a totally different life. Learning how to. Another thing, like you'd hear about that there was going to be maybe something going off in the yard, a riot, or someone's going to get stabbed. So you wear magazines under your jacket. And I used to call my mom and say, Mom, can you get me a subscription to Vogue? Because Vogue back then used to be a real thing. And she's like, what's wrong with you? Like, are you going gay or something?
Are you flipping?
And I think, no, I need the magazines for a reason. So she'd come to visit and she'd be, why am I buying you these magazines that are women magazines? I said, because they're thick. And when I tape them together, it's like wearing a vest and I don't have to worry about getting stabbed.
So you seriously take the magazines,
you tape them together.
Like a bulletproof sort of vest or shank-proof vest.
Right. And you put that on, then you put your jacket over that. So when you go on the yard, if something should happen and you got in the middle of something, you had protection. But it didn't look good to my mom because she thought I was like turning on her.
Yeah, she's like, why are you looking at women's magazines?
Yeah, but those were the thickest ones. They were always good. Sears catalog, that was a great one to have.
Hilarious.
But and you learn things in prison about yourself that you would never learn on the street. And
Wow.
you find the resilience to get through things. You find the strength to deal with being away from family or whatever. I got out. My mom got sick with cancer, so I got out on a appeal bond, which gives you the opportunity to get out and visit and spend time. And I had to put up so much money. I got out. I got to spend 10 days with my mom before she passed away. So that was not that she knew who I was because she was all drugged up, but in the morning she would know it was me. Then the rest of the day, she had no idea who I was. I was either my dad, a friend of me. I was never me. She didn't get it. But the first thing in the morning, I'd have coffee with her and she knew it was me. So that's like one memory that's always stayed with me. But what happened was after she passed away, I wasn't ready to go back because who would want to go back? So I had a friend that lived in Canada, Vancouver, who said, "Hey, come here. We'll arrange for you to get across the border." I said, "All right, cool, let's go." So I tried to hide my movement because technically I was being watched by probation because I was out for a little bit. So I snuck away. I got on a bus, went to Seattle, went up to the coast, and I was across the bay from what not Vancouver, but in Canada was White Rock, which was across the bay. And there's the bay there, and that's actually where the customs into Canada is and leaving the States. And if you walk the beach right there, there's actually a line where you can't walk any further because it turns into Canada. So you have to go to the customs office on the beach. But then we were at a harbor point where the marina was, and there's a customs office there also. Well, my friend arranges this elaborate plan to get me over to Canada. And what it entailed was a boat ride. So I figured, okay, they know what they're doing, right? They've done this before. He's a smuggler of pot, so he's got to know how to smuggle me. So his friend he's on the other side of the bay on a dock waiting for me, and I'm on this side. And his friend is taking a boat down from Vancouver, and he comes into the harbor, never checks in with customs, just docks his boat, comes and gets me. We get on board the boat, and I figure we're going to go back up the coast. Well, this kid decides to take a straight shot across the bay so he can get over to the dock the fastest way. So we're basically not obeying any laws of customs. We're going across the bay, and all of a sudden the boat stops and the engine's smoking, or the motor's smoking. And I was going, like of all places to stop, we're like maybe almost halfway across, and the boat stops dead in the water. And I'm like, oh, I'm going to get arrested for sure. So come to find out, he had gone through a kelp patch. So the kelp's all wrapped around the prop. And I tell him, you're going to have to go down there and try to cut this stuff off. And he says, well, I'm not a good swimmer. I said, you're on a boat. You're not a good swimmer. So I end up going overboard to get the kelp off. And we make it across. We get over to the other side. And we're all happy. I made it. We're all congratulating each other. And then two local RCMPs, Royal Canadian Mounted Police, come walking up to the dock. And they're asking, do you know who owns that car? Well, it happens to be my friend's car. And he goes, yeah, it's mine. And I'm sweating like I'm ready to pee my pants. So I figured the gig is over. And what it was they were interested in the car and they wanted to know who owned it. And after they said, well, we really like this car, they gave him a parking ticket because he'd forgotten to put money in the meter. So they gave him a ticket for that. And we're all sitting there thinking it's all over. I'm getting arrested. They're getting arrested. Well, I ended up spending 6 months in Vancouver basically on the run. And
wow.
I stayed up there. Yeah, I stayed up there. Actually enjoyed myself. I was living in a hotel, had an extended stay room, and they the hotel was the location for, I can't think of the TV show at the time, but it was a show being shot in Canada that played on the U.S. TV stations. And one day they were filming upstairs in the area where the rooms were, and they asked if I wanted to be on the TV show. and they'd give me a part and I'd get paid. I'm like, I'd really like to, but I can't. It's like, I don't want to put my face on TV. And they're saying, come on, we'll give you $1,000 to be on it. I said, no, that's okay. And I went downstairs to the bar and said, this is nuts. I got to get out of this hotel. And that's when I found out they shoot there like every 2 to 3 days for this TV show.
Oh, wow.
So anyways, I ended up living up there. And then when the lawyers said, look, the feds don't want it. They want you back. They're gonna find you sooner or later. They're gonna, give you more time. They're willing just to take you back, let you finish your time. So I went back, finished my time, got out. Like I said, came to California.
So you literally got away with it, basically?
Yeah, basically they just were sick of me because I basically was a pain in their ass. Excuse my language. They said, you're a pain. Nobody wants to deal with you in probation. We're going to make you finish your time. So I walked out with no probation, usually when you get out of prison, you have supervised release, like for 3 years or 5 years. I aggravated them so much, they just made me finish my time and walk out. And like, we don't want you anymore. Get out. And the judge was really nice. She said, I expect to see you here again. And I just looked at her and said, I don't think so. And because I was going to move to California. You never see me again. If I get in trouble, it'll be in California, not Rhode Island or Providence or New York or any other place, So I ended up coming out here. And like I said, what's happened since then is a whole different experience. By the time I got out, the web was going because it was just starting when I went in. 1995, I remember meeting with a guy who said, what do you think about the World Wide Web? And I was like, what's that? Then I was in prison for the whole time I was in prison. I read about it, learned about it, had access to computers to do things in-house, but you couldn't do anything on the web. So you never knew what it really was. Just heard the teacher that was up there talk about it. And because I used to teach one of the classes there. And I actually taught, one of the classes I taught in the evenings was that book I wrote, Dynamic Life Management. They used that for inmates instead of a 12-step program. They found it to be more, actually the inmates are the ones that liked it better. They wrote reviews. I had guys that were doing double life, taking this class on how to manage their life better and how to manage their time in prison better. And I actually rewrote the whole workbook to fit prison. It was with everything that what goes on inside prison and all that. So it got approved by the Bureau of Prisons, the psychology department, and I was the teacher of it. And, but that's how I learned about the web, was hearing from other teachers what was going on, reading magazines. And when I got out in 2005, was the first time I ever built a website, which was real, that was, like you said, it can be depressing, and it was. Because I knew nothing about what I was doing, I was using Yahoo GeoCities at the time to build a website. That's how long ago it was, Like, I'm embarrassed to even say that, but that's what I used.
Well, it was the shit back in the day. I mean, it was the thing.
And Yahoo was the place to be, back then, or AOL, one of the two. But Yahoo offered the most, And then over time, what happened was, like I said, I got diabetes, and my quest to understand diabetes more was mainly because they misdiagnosed me. They diagnosed me at first with type 1, and I was 54 at the time, and they said, well, it's called LADA, L-A-D-A, which is latent autoimmune diabetes in adults. And it's not type 2, it's not type 1, it's type 1.5. And I'm like, gee, it figures I can't do my best. I couldn't get 1, I can't get 2, I got it in the middle. So they diagnosed me that way, started me on this real strong treatment of metformin and insulin. And what happened was, Patty came home one day and found me in the bedroom like a zombie. I was all screwed up. I couldn't talk, I couldn't move. And she called the pharmacy because she couldn't reach the doctor, of course. So she called the pharmacy and she said, I just found Mark. He's lethargic. He's basically just about breathing. And the pharmacist asked her, what's he taking? So she told him, and he said, get him off metformin immediately and stop his insulin. So they did. And 3 days later, I came back out of it. And by that time, she had talked to the doctors. They decided to change my regimen. But that's what forced me to start researching diseases. And I had already had the heart attacks, but I already knew a lot about the heart because my uncle had heart problems, other family, so I knew that. But diabetes was new to me. And then to get it at such a late time in life, it's like your world changes. All of a sudden, you can't eat this, you can't eat that. Look, I enjoy. No one's going to make me eat turkey meatballs. Okay, there's, there's no damn cow with feathers.
Turkey meatballs are good.
Oh no. There's no cows with feathers. Okay, there's no pigs with feathers either. Pigs don't fly. Okay, you make a meatball.
I like pigs.
Yeah. They're pork and meat to make a meatball, not turkey, okay, not chicken. But they kept telling me about, well, it tastes good. No, it doesn't, okay, it doesn't. And I've tried turkey meat. I even tried the Italian turkey, and it doesn't brown. It stays gray, okay. It never gets even if you fry it, it stays gray. It's amazing. I've never seen meat that stayed gray. That's turkey.
Usually, if you see meat that stays gray, that's always a bad sign.
Yeah, they said you can't have this, you can't have bread, you can't have pasta. Okay, you're telling a Sicilian that he might as well die, And I'm also half Irish, so I was told I couldn't have beer either. And that's come on. So what happened was, so I started doing all my own research. I started actually medicating myself, and I found a doctor that would listen to me. And even though her and I would fight about treatments, we got along really well, and we figured out what works best for me. And she's the one that really diagnosed me with, you're not this type, you're type 2. You don't need all this insulin. You don't need all this going into you. What you need is more control. And you need to lose weight. At the time, I weighed 280 pounds, almost 290 at the time. I'm now 200. And I lost it, but thanks. I lost it over 3 years, 4 years. And all that time, it was really about just paying attention to what I eat, not cutting everything out, but paying attention. Don't eat a half a pound of pasta, eat a quarter pound. Don't eat 3 slices of bread, eat 1. Don't put butter on the bread. The little things. Give up soda, give up diet soda. Drink water. It's better for you,
Yeah.
But through all the research, what happened was we opened up 3 websites. And one was for adults, one was for kids, and one was for seniors. And the adult website actually had a 4th part, which was animals, because a lot of people don't realize that dogs and cats get diabetes. And my wife, Patty, was really big on, and of course, animals, and I was also. And she is the one that said, do you realize that dogs and cats get diabetes? And there's a lot, people don't even know about it and aren't even aware of that. So we started this whole thing about animal awareness again, about diabetes and how to do your blood check and how to help, give your dog a shot or a cat and take their blood and all that. But the main thing we worked on was kids. And the name of the organization was and is Diabetic Kids for Life. And LIFE was an acronym. The LIFE was an acronym for Lessons in Future Empowerment. Because we wanted kids to know that you could do something. You could do more with your life no matter what.
Yeah.
And at the time, I got to brag a little bit about this, even though I've been bragging this whole hour. At the time, I was on this big kick about kids having type 2 diabetes. And of course, everyone said, no, that's not so. They only get type 1. And I said, well, you don't understand. Type 2 isn't about fat and lazy. Type 2 is a genetic disorder. Because I've been doing all this research. And I kept saying it's a genetic disorder, and that's what's going on. And no one believed me. Everyone said I was crazy. Well, Children's Hospital in Los Angeles did a study about 2 years ago where they found a high incident rate of type 2 diabetes in children, and it was growing. And what happens is the schools weren't prepared for it because they're prepared for type 1 diabetics. They have what they call the 504 plan, and no one knew about type 2 in kids, and now they're bringing it all out that a lot of children have type 2 diabetes. That's why they're lethargic in school, or they're sleepy, their nutrition is off. There's a case there where a lot of children are overweight or whatever, and it's all tied to type 2 diabetes. And now it's all coming out that there is type 2 in children. Yeah. So, I was like patting myself on the back saying, see, I told you so. And of course, no one listened anyways. But my main thrust of when I got into diabetes was, here's the issue, and you probably have heard this over and over. There's type 1, there's type 2. And there's a big argument about which is worse, type 1 or type 2. And if you research diabetes, 90 to 95% of the people in the world that have diabetes have type 2. So there's not a lot of money going into the type 1 research. It all goes to type 2 because they're really trying to figure out how to control it because there's so many people. So type 1 kind of gets pushed to the back. And it is a major concern because they do have extra health issues. They have to be more stringent on their diet. They have to be more concerned about their blood numbers, their insulin intake. But that also applies to type 2s. But type 2s have always been known to be fat and lazy. That's what they consider it. And when you join a community, if it's a type 1 community and you have type 2, you get blacklisted or blackballed. And I was really upset about that because I didn't think it was fair, because I think both sides have something to learn from each other about living with diabetes. So my goal was to break this Berlin Wall down between type 1 and type 2, like get these people together. And, you know, it's what I learned about, let's say, funding. I found out like cancer, the Cancer Society, American Cancer Society goes to Capitol Hill and they get gazillion dollars for cancer research for every type of cancer. Well, diabetes, you have the ADA, American Diabetes Association, and the JDRF, which is for the kids. They go up individually to Capitol Hill. So one group gets this amount, one group gets that amount. Instead of going as a team and saying, we're fighting diabetes together, we need money. They don't do it that way. So what happens is the ADA gets all this money where the JDRF and type 1 gets less money because there's more people in the ADA. So I've always thought that if we all got together socially instead of medically, we'd probably get a lot more money funding for research for everybody, not just type 2s or type 1.5s. So that was my, our goal. Patty and I worked on that for years, trying to break the barriers. And then we did the awareness weekends, and that was always in November during diabetes awareness. So we got live stream, like I said, to donate 10 high definition channels to us. And the first time we did it, we started on a Friday night on Diabetes Awareness Day, which was on the 14th. So on Friday night, we started at 6:00 p.m. from our home. We had 5 computers hooked up. And originally, our first year, this is how crazy I was. I signed a contract to lease out a place out here called Selling Arena. It's a big arena, and I had a PR firm that promised me all these sponsors. So I put my name on the contract for $25,000, which I didn't have, but I guaranteed them that I was going to have all these sponsors. A week before the event, the PR firm said, we kind of goofed up. We didn't really reach out to anybody. We can't do anything for you. So I went back with my tail between my legs to the arena management and said, look, I got to get out of this contract. And after a long battle, they let me go. So we ran this thing from our home with 5 computers. We had the American Diabetes Association show up, the JDRF, and we had the computers in the house and outside. We kept moving from site to site so that people would feel like they were getting something better than just the living room. And we started on a Friday night at 6:00 and went until Sunday night at midnight, straight through. We didn't raise any money. We didn't ask for any money. All we asked for people to listen. We brought on surgeons that operate from Diabetes Research Institute. We had sports figures. We had Jay Cutler. We had Will Cross, who's a mountain climber. Chris Freeman, who's a cross-country skier and an Olympic medalist. And we brought on anyone that had diabetes to talk to kids. We had kids on all weekend meeting each other. We had parents meeting each other. We had other organizations tied in with us that were like they would help people lose weight, or they were working with type 2 diabetics or type 1. The whole thing was to bring a mix of diabetics together, 1 and 2. And that's what we did. And we had 50,000 people 50,000 viewers come in for the first first year that we did that. So we did it a second year. We brought in about 100,000. Third year, we reached 150. And our last year that we did it, the 4th year, which was in 2013, We brought in 250,000 viewers that spent the whole weekend with us. They had to watch us in our pajamas. We were up all hours of the day and night while the computers ran. And all they did was connect people through live stream. And from the console, we ran 10 different stations. We had people from all over the world join in. Well, what happened was the reason we stopped was that fourth year, we had two women, two mothers, one of a type 2 and one of a type 1. In the middle of Sunday afternoon, I had a doctor that was writing for us at the time with the websites. And he was talking to one of the mothers, and the second mother chimed in. And first, the two mothers started arguing with each other about type 1 and type 2. Then they attacked the doctor, who was trying to tell them the same things that were going on, that, you know, it is individual, but there's still some very common ground. So they attacked him together. They teamed up after fighting each other, attacked the doctor. And it just got so out of control that I just got fed up with, to be honest with you, I got fed up with everything about diabetes. I shut down all the websites. I was frustrated because we weren't making any groundwork. We'd spent 5 years fighting for diabetes, and all we ended up with is still two people fighting over the dumbest thing. And that's when I was stressed out. We went into the new year. I told Patty, I said, she was worried about me. I'd gone into depression because I just figured I couldn't do any more. I'd really shot everything out of me. You know, there was nothing left to give. So she said, I was working 24 hours. You know, it was my life. Diabetes, I lived it every day. So I quit. I walked away from it. I spent a year not writing, not doing anything for diabetes. Then I opened up a website called Health in the Laugh Lane, thinking, let's start moseying on back to diabetes, but let's take it from the general perspective. So for a couple of years, I had a website, Health in the Laugh Lane, did that for a little while. It never really took off. There's a failure, to be honest. Another one in the life of me. But I didn't know enough about websites. I didn't know enough about social media. I didn't know enough about reaching out to people. So I took time to start learning all about Twitter. And I was on Twitter, but I never took time into it. I didn't really use Facebook. I didn't use everything that's out there. So I started researching all social media, SEO, started reading a lot from Danny Sullivan, who became like, I followed the guy since I found out about him to learn more about marketing, learn more about SEO work. Followed you. That's how I started finding out about you, watching what you did. Saying, wow, look at this guy. Here's a guy who gets on there. He's not ashamed of anything. He tells his stuff. And that impressed me. You just talk the way you talk. And to me, I've always been, as you can tell, I can talk for hours, but I never could write really well. And writing a blog and all that really, like, it's tough for me, especially with ADHD. It's hard to write with ADHD, okay? Because I might be writing about diabetes, and then the next thing I'm writing about is the rabbit that's running across the yard. Okay, I can't do that. Yeah, but I can do a podcast because I get into a visualization thing. So I can go on. I used to do, just so you know, with diabetes, I did a 1-hour podcast on Blog Talk Radio 5 nights a week. I did a radio show for 2 years. And I used to do a Saturday show for kids. I never went in scripted. I never wrote a script. I never had a topic. I would start the show, decide on the topic once I said, hi, welcome to Diabetic Life. And then I'd start talking and talk for an hour with people calling in and all that. And my Patty would go crazy. She goes, what are you talking about tonight? I said, I don't know, but I'll let you know when the show starts. And I'd start the show and start going. And she goes, how do you do that? I said, I don't know. I've always been able to talk with no script. I can't use a script because I get tongue-tied. Put me in front of anything and I can talk. A group, 1,000, 10,000, no problem. Tell me to write a blog post, I'm baffled. Okay.
So how's the podcast doing these days?
Podcast, surprisingly, it's all Mishegoss is doing well. It's on iTunes. It's on Google Play. It's on Stitcher. It's on what's the other one? The Outcast? Is that the?
I think so. Yeah, with the K.
So yeah. It's getting. I went on Anchor for a lot of reasons. One, I like the idea of being able to do everything on my iPhone. I can work it. They got music already. I used to use Blueberry. I used to do a podcast I started out with the podcast being almost an hour long. I cut it down to 15 minutes because that's usually about attention span. And with Anchor FM, their thing was 5-minute podcast. So now I had to learn how to speak in 5 minutes to get my point across.
Yeah.
Then it was you can add episodes. So you can tie you could do a whole hour, 2 hours if you tie them all together. But it's not one continuous. It has like an interlude and then it goes to the next one. So I decided I'm going to do 5-minute spurts and try to get my mind into doing 5 minutes. So I've been doing that for maybe 7 months now. And I found Anchor to be really great with their SEO. I'm getting roughly 20,000 listeners on and off between iTunes, between Google, and between Anchor. But now they just redid their app, and now you can do an extended. It's not 5 minutes anymore. You go as long as you want, so you don't have to break it up. And I haven't tested it. I did. I tested it out the other day. I went a whole 6 minutes and 13 seconds, which was tough. Like I ran out of words because I'm used to doing 5 minutes. And I was looking at the clock and I'm thinking, I only got like 30 seconds to go. And it's always like, hurry up to finish. Now I got time. So I did the first podcast the other day with time, and that was kind of interesting. And I found over the course of these podcasting, since with Blueberry, and I used another one called Shout Engine, that when you go longer than 15 to 20 minutes, everyone clicks off. They go to the next podcast or they're tired of hearing it. And that's not, it depends on the pod. Like my podcasts weren't interviews. They're always me talking and doing something. Or I brought my grandkids into some of the podcasts because they always have something great to say, hopefully. And so I make the podcast fun because it's all Mishegoss. I talk about stuff that relates to business or relates to life. Like right now I've done a couple of podcasts on hitting your stride. My big thing just before the new year was about listening, how listening skills have dropped. No one listens anymore. They all want to talk and no one wants to listen.
What?
And yeah, see? So I said, like I watch these guys on like all the gurus, Gary Vaynerchuk and all these guys that are up there preaching and going, and they're great speakers, but do they really listen to their audience? Do they ask questions? Do they really care about what people are wondering? And whenever I do a speech, nowadays I get called to do something like at a local school or something. My biggest thing is when I go in with an idea for a topic, the first thing I do is I ask, look, does this topic interest you? Because a lot of times they tell you what they want you to talk about. Like, hey, we want you to talk about newsletters. So I'll get in front of a group and say, do you really care about newsletters? And if they say no, I go off on what do you guys want to hear about? Give me a topic. And if I know about it, I'll talk about it. If I don't, I'm going to tell you I know jack about it, and I'll go on to something else. So it works. People like that because they want to be heard. They want to, express themselves. And I don't think enough of the people that are out there don't listen when they're doing a speech or a motivational thing. They're not listening to the audience. They're there to give a point of view, which is their job. I know that. That's their thing, is to get up there, shoot their mouth off, and then walk off the stage and collect a bunch of money. And then if they do a Q&A, that's great. Oh, whoopee, they got a Q&A afterwards. But how many people really listen to their audience? And how many people listen? I'm sorry, go ahead.
That's true. Yeah. So Mark, these stories are amazing. We're going to have you on the show to finish your life story, but give us some plugs to the podcast and everything so that we can have people going there and checking it all out.
Okay. The podcast is It's All Mishegoss, MISHEGOSS.com. And if you go there, that'll bring you to the newsletter. That'll bring you to the newsletter. And the podcast is at anchor.fm. So if you go to anchor.fm/It's All Mishegoss, or if you're on the app Anchor, just go to keyword Mishegoss and I'll pop up. And that podcast is usually 2 to 3 days a week, depending on my mood. Just kind of flows. And that's it. And the new website that's going to be actually being put together this weekend is healthybroccoli.com. It should be up and running by Monday. Cool. And that website is going to be really about awareness. It's going to tackle things like pretty much everything that we go, diabetes, heart disease. I'm fighting post-polio syndrome right now, and there's a lot of other people out there doing that. So we're going to try to cover animals, everything, but it's going to be more awareness about what's going on, what you need to look for, and stuff like that. Even diets. We're reading a lot of diet books right now. One of them that's really good, just the plug for the book, is How Not to Die. If you want to get a good book, get that book. Seriously.
It sounds like a good book to be reading.
Oh, it really is. It's by this doctor whose grandmother got healed by going to Pratikhin out in California. And he wrote this book called How Not to Die. And it's a complete thing about dieting and plant-based meals. And he gives you recipes. And it's really, Patty picked it up the other day at the bookstore. And we were laughing because of what it said, How Not to Die. And it's been about the best book I've read about lifestyle and living and changing things.
Most definitely. Well, Mark, thanks for coming on the show.
Yeah,
You've had some of the most interesting stories that I've heard in a long time. And I remember those old mafia days. We used to have friends in Hell's Kitchen back in the 90s.
Okay.
Yeah, those are some interesting times and good people. But we definitely love you being on the show. Everyone go check out Mark's podcast and all that good stuff. I'm sure you're going to hear like a multitude of just incredible stories that are just going to be awesome. And Mark, let's have you on again in the future so we can hear more great stories from you.
I'll have to get you on my show too. We'll have to do a swap.
Hey, I will come on your show anytime. Just hit me up.
Great.
And,
okay.
In fact, you know what's so funny is I spend so much time doing shows. Like we're doing 3 today. In fact, that's why I'm kind of cutting you short, as we've got to move into another one here in about 10 minutes. I realized the other day that I'm never on anyone's podcast because I'm so busy doing my own podcast. But I love the fun of talking to people and hearing their stories and the complexity of life and stuff that I haven't ever experienced. That's very fun to live through the lives of other people. Like for instance, you, like I don't want to personally know what 10 years in jail is like, so I'll just enjoy your stories.
Yeah, it'll make it a lot more fun, But yeah, seriously, let's swap podcast interviews in the future. I'll hit you up and we'll do one.
Sounds good, Mark. Thanks for joining us.
All right.
And thanks to my audience. We certainly appreciate you guys always coming by. If you listen to this point, we love you even more. And be sure to give us a like, subscribe to us on YouTube, hit that bell notification button so you can take and do that. Please review the show if you would on iTunes and Google Play. We certainly need some stars and all that good stuff to help with its distribution and getting people to watch it, see it. All that good stuff. Go to patreon.com/Chris Voss. And of course, I think I mentioned you can subscribe at YouTube and Google Play and iTunes. So there's that. Thanks for everyone for tuning in. Thanks for Mark. And we'll see you guys next time.